What are the steps for dividing by two-digit numbers? Think about this question during the lesson. A theater sold 428 tickets for a show. A section in this theater has 64 seats. How many sections must there be to seat all the ticket holders? What operation should you choose to answer this question? Divide to answer the question. How would you set up this problem? Set it up as 428 divided by 64. What are you trying to find out? You are finding out how many sections are required to seat every ticket buyer. Estimate to help decide where to place the first digit in the quotient. 428 divided by 64 is about 420 divided by 70, or 6. Divide the ones. There will be a remainder. What does a remainder 44 tell you? You must add one more section onto 6 sections to accommodate the remaining 44 ticket seat holders. Check the reasonableness of your answer. So the theater must have 7 sections. Now you know the steps for dividing by a two-digit number and getting a one-digit quotient.
Howdy ho, folks. Today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Unit 4, Lesson 7, where we're going to focus on doing two-digit division, but when my quotient, or my answer, only ends up being a one-digit answer. So all of the answers in our problems today are going to be less than 10. We might have big remainders, but all of our whole number quotients are going to be less than 10. Now, we've been working up on doing long division, and we last left off at practicing what do I do when my two-digit divisor ends in a 10, when it's a multiple of 10. Nice, simple numbers to work with. Today what we're going to do is take it a step further, and we're going to take a look at what do I do when my divisor is not a multiple of 10, and it's a little bit trickier to work with. Now, what I did was I wrote the steps for solving this type of problem on the right-hand side of the screen, and we're going to use these steps as we go through this problem. So let's take a look at our first problem. It's 330 divided by 42, and let's work through this problem together so I can show you how we solve problems such as this. All right, so I remember that my steps for multiplying are divide, multiply, subtract, compare, and bring down, or does McDonald's sell cheeseburgers? I'm still going to follow the same steps. I'm just going to now apply them with a bigger number. So the first thing I want to do, 42 is my divisor. 42 knocks on the door and 33 answers. Now 33 is too small. It's smaller than 42, so I can't divide with that number, so I have to pick up the 0. Well, now I have 330. I'm using the whole number, and 330 is tricky. I can't do that in my head. That's hard. I don't know how many times I can take 42 away from 330, and I know we don't ever guess in math. So now I need to figure out a starting off point. I need to figure out where to start. So here's where I want to come over and use these steps. Make sure that you write them down. First step is to round the divisor, that's 42, round the divisor to the nearest tens. We love anything that ends in a 0 because it's easier to work with. So I'm going to take 42 and round it to the nearest tens, which would be 40. I'm going to write it here underneath the 42 because I need the 42 in just a minute. I'm not getting rid of it. I'm just borrowing it really quickly so that I can have a good starting off point. So write it underneath, and you can even put it in parentheses if you want so that you know it's just kind of a helper. Now, just like we did when we're using compatible numbers, I want to focus in on the 4. And then I want to look at the first two digits in the dividend because I'm finding compatible numbers. So I want to find a number that's close to 33 that can evenly be divided by 4. Now, if you know in your head your multiples of 4, then you know that 32 is a number close to 33 that can be divided by 4, and that 32 divided by 4 is 8. If you can't do it in your head and you're not 100% certain, when in doubt, skip count. So I could count by 4s until I find a number that's just over 33, and then I would take a look at what two numbers it falls in between and where it's closest. Now if I take a look, 33 falls between 32 and 36, but it's closer to 32. So 32 is a multiple of 4, and you multiply it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. So 32 divided by 4 is 8. Now, 8 is going to be my starting off point. So I want to go back. I'm going to get rid of that 40, and I want to go back to my regular steps. The next step says I have to multiply. So the next thing I want to do is I want to take this 8, and I want to multiply it by 42, because 42 is the real number we're working with. Now, this is where I recommend that you guys use a nice big sheet of paper when you're doing long division, because we have a couple steps that we have to go through in order to solve this problem, and we don't want to run out of room. So I'm going to do it over here in the lower right-hand corner. I'm going to do 42 times 8. 8 times 2 is 16. Put down my 6 and carry my 1. 8 times 4 is 32, plus 1 is 33. Now hold on, if I look, I see that, wait a minute, 336 is bigger than my dividend. The number that I got when I multiplied 42 8 times, that's bigger than 330. So 8 has to be too big. If I come over to my steps, and if I look right here, it tells me if my product, so when I multiply, this is my product, it's the answer to a multiplication problem. If your product is too large, decrease your quotient, that's 8, the answer to a division problem. Decrease your quotient by 1 and try again. Well, okay, let's see. 8 minus 1 is 7. Now, here's where we have a little shortcut. In this multiplication problem right here, I used 42 8 times. Now I only want to use 42 7 times, so I need 1 less 42. 1 less 42 is a fancy way of saying minus 42. So all you need to do is come over here to where we originally worked and subtract 42. Now this difference will end up giving me a sum, this will end up giving me a number that I can then use to subtract from 330. So it'll give me 42 7 times. So if I subtract, 6 minus 2 is 4. 3 minus 4 I can't do, so I'll borrow from the 3 and make it a 2, and make this 3 a 13. 13 minus 4 is 9, and now bring down that 2, and I have 294. 294 is less than 330, so I can absolutely use that. Now I'm going to continue with the next step, which is to subtract. 0 minus 4 I can't do. Let's turn this into a 2, turn this into a 10. 10 minus 4 is 6. 2 minus 9 I can't do, so we'll turn this into a 2 and turn this 2 into a 12. So now I can do 12 minus 9 is 3. 2 minus 2 is 0. If I compare, 36 is less than 42, so I'm good. The 7 is good. And I don't have any other numbers to bring down, so this 36 becomes my remainder. So my final answer is 7 with a remainder of 36. Doing longer division problems really isn't that much difficult as long as you're remembering to use these steps over here and as long as you're taking your time and working carefully. Let's try another one. So let's clear this. Let's do 550 divided by 57. All right, so I know the steps for dividing. I divide first, then I multiply, then I subtract, compare, and bring down. Does McDonald's sell cheeseburgers? So I look at the 57. 57 knocks on the door of the doghouse. 55 answers. 55 is not big enough, so I have to pick up that 0. Now I've got 550. That's hard to work with. I can't do that in my head. So now I'm going to come over and use my steps over here. First step says round the divisor to the nearest 10. Well, 57 rounded to the nearest tens is 60. So I'm going to write 60 in parentheses because that's the number I'm going to use to help me. I'm just going to use compatible numbers to find a starting off point. I'm going to look at that 6. And then step 2 says look at the first 2 digits in the dividend, which is 55. I want to find a number close to 55 that can be divided by 6. If you can do this in your head, that's awesome. If you can't, when in doubt, skip count. So I'm going to count by sixes, and I'm going to keep going until I get larger than 55. So I'm going to keep going until my number is bigger than 55. Whoops, I stop. So my number is between 54 and 60. 54 is closer. And 54 I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. So I'm going to use 9 as a starting off point. Now, I want to go back and use my actual 57 because 57 is my divisor, not 60. So I want to work with the 57. So now what I need to do is I need to multiply 57 times 9. That's the next step in dividing. I'm going to multiply this out. 9 times 7 is 63. Put down the 3, carry the 6. 9 times 5 is 45, plus 6 is 51. So 57 times 9 is 513. Well, 513 is not bigger than 550, so I can definitely use it. What I'm going to do now is subtract. That's the next step. 0 minus 3 I can't do, so I'm going to come over here and borrow from the 5. Turn it into a 4 and circle it. Turn the 0 into a 10. 10 minus 3 is 7. 4 minus 1 is 3. 5 minus 5 is 0. If I compare, my 37 is definitely less than my 57. I have no other numbers to bring down, so this becomes my remainder. So my final answer is 9 with a remainder of 37. So you see, it's really not much different than what we did before when we were using multiples of 10. Let's try one last problem, and then I'll let you guys work on some on your own. Now what I want to do, my last problem, is I want to do 528 divided by 56. 528 divided by 56. All right, so same thing. Let's follow the same steps. 56 knocks on the door, 52 answers. It's not big enough, so I have to pick up that 8. 528 is really big. I can't do that one in my head. So now I want to follow these steps over here for dividing with large dividends. First thing I want to do is take 56 and round it to the nearest tens, which is 60. I'm going to use the 6, and I want to look at the first 2 digits in the dividend, which is 52, to figure out a compatible number. Now, I want to figure out a number close to 52 that can evenly be divided by 60. Hopefully you guys can do that in your head, and if not, we can skip count. When in doubt, skip count. So I'm going to count by sixes, and I'm going to keep going until I get bigger than 52. All right, 52 is between 48 and 56. I'm going to use 48. 48 was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times that I was able to divide by 60. So I'm going to use 8 as my starting off point. So now what I want to do is follow the next group of steps. The next steps after I divide is that I multiply. So now I'm going to do 56 times 8. 8 times 6 is 48. Put down the 8, carry the 4. 8 times 5 is 40, plus 4 is 44. If I check, 448 is definitely less than 528, so I can keep going with my next step, which is to subtract. If I subtract, 8 minus 8 is 0. 2 minus 4 I can't do, so let's turn this 5 into a 4 and turn this 2 into a 12. 12 minus 4 is 8, and 4 minus 4 is 0. Now, I want to compare. Uh-oh, wait a minute. If I compare, I notice that 80 is bigger than 56. So my product worked, 448 worked, but it was too big. So now let's come over and take a look at the directions in pink. Right here it says, if your product works, 448 worked, but your difference when we subtracted is too large add 1 to the quotient. So I'm going to make my quotient bigger. I'm going to make my 8 into a 9. And then subtract your divisor again. So now I'm going to subtract 56 from 80 because I am using 56 one more time. So the reason I'm not subtracting it from 448 is because I didn't make my number smaller. I made my number bigger. So I'm subtracting it here from the difference. So if you make your number smaller, you're subtracting it from your product from when you started. And if you're making your number bigger, you're subtracting it from your ending difference. We'll practice this a couple times in lessons, so you'll get the hang of it. So all I want to do now is subtract 56 again, because I'm using, instead of using 56 8 times, now I'm using 56 9 times. So 0 minus 6 I can't do. I'm going to borrow from the 8 and turn it into a 7. Make that 0 a 10. 10 minus 6 is 4. 7 minus 5 is 2. If I compare, 24 is definitely less than 56, and I have nothing left to bring down. So this becomes my remainder. So your final answer is 9 with a remainder of 24. Make sure that you guys have these directions over here written down. You will want to use them and refer back to them when we complete our lessons. So it's important that you understand what you do when you have bigger dividends and what you do if your numbers that you're working with are too big or too small. Go ahead and try some problems on your own, and I can't wait to see you guys practice these skills in lesson. Great job.